Let's delve into the conception of discourse as a social practice. As we see here, discourse, along with text and social reality, plays a central role in critical language study. The key idea is that language isn't just about individual words or sentences, but about how language functions within social contexts. Discourse is understood as a form of social practice, meaning it's shaped by and also shapes the social world around us. This influence occurs on three levels. First, the social situation. Think about the specific context or setting. Second, social institutions, like education, politics, or media, which form a broader matrix. And third, society as a whole, the large-scale social structures. A crucial point is that discourse is a system of statements that constructs an object meaning. Through language, we create and define what something is. Discourse doesn't just describe reality, it actively does things. It has performative power. Furthermore, discourse sets certain rules for talking about a topic. It rules in some ways of speaking, while ruling out others. So, it limits what can be said or understood about an issue, which is essential for understanding how knowledge and power are constructed through language. All of these points highlight that language is deeply intertwined with social practice, which aligns with our overall theme of examining how language shapes and is shaped by social realities. Let's take a closer look at the role of ideology and how it ties into the Marxian legacy within critical discourse analysis. When we talk about ideology, we're often referring to the ways in which power is exercised in society, particularly through ideas and discourses rather than just through force or coercion. This perspective is deeply rooted in the Marxist tradition, which emphasizes that ideology is a key mechanism by which social relations and class conflicts are maintained and reproduced. Critical approaches highlight that ideology isn't just about false beliefs or illusions. It's about how certain ideas serve to uphold power structures in modern society. Particularly, they act as a way to exercise influence without overt coercion. Think of how institutions shape our perceptions and beliefs subtly, but powerfully. In capitalist societies, the link between class relations and discourses is mediated by various types of discourse within social institutions like schools, media, and political organizations. These discourses help reproduce the dominant ideology and, consequently, the existing class structure. Now, from a Marxist perspective, understanding ideology involves two key aspects. First, we need to start with Marx's critique of what he called objective thought forms. That is, the basic ideas or beliefs that appear neutral but are actually shaped by class interests. Second, we have to analyze the so-called ideological state apparatuses, which include institutions like schools, churches, and political parties. These are not just passive transmitters, but have their own mode of existence that actively sustains and reproduces the dominant ideology. So, in essence, ideology links directly to class conflict, and understanding this connection is crucial for analyzing how power functions in society through discourse. This framework helps us see beyond surface-level communication to the deeper ways in which language and ideas serve to sustain social inequalities. Let's take a closer look at the mechanisms of power in discourse. Essentially, when we talk about power in interaction, we're referring to how some participants hold influence over others, often by controlling or constraining what others can say or do. This control isn't random, it's structured and systematic. These constraints can be grouped into three overlapping types. First, there are constraints on contents ***, that is, restrictions on what is said or done during the interaction. Second, we have *** relations ***, which involve controlling the social relationships or roles that people can assume in discourse. And third, there are *** subjects, meaning constraints on the subject positions people can occupy, like being an expert, a subordinate, or a witness. Most importantly, these constraints are usually imposed by powerful institutional or class figures. Think authorities, institutions, or social hierarchies. They shape the linguistic forms and routines we use, guiding how conversations are structured and what is considered appropriate. Understanding these mechanisms helps us see how language isn't just about communication. It's also a tool for maintaining power and social order within discourse. Let's talk about the institutional reproduction of class and the hidden agendas behind social institutions. Essentially, social structures, including class relations, shape how we speak and interact. This is what we call discourse. But importantly, these structures are not just shaping discourse, they are also reproduced through it. This connection happens through different types of discourse found in social institutions, like in education, the legal system, or healthcare. For example, the relations between teachers and students are embedded in educational discourse. This isn't just about teaching, it's also a way that class relations are reinforced. So, while institutions like schools, courts, or hospitals have clear, overt functions, they also have what we call a hidden agenda. That agenda involves maintaining and reproducing existing class structures and other social hierarchies. In short, these institutions serve more than their obvious purposes. They play a role in sustaining the social order. Understanding this helps us see how power and class are kept in place, even as institutions appear neutral or beneficial. This idea ties back to the overall theme of how social structures persist and influence our daily lives in subtle, often unseen ways. Let's delve into the idea of class and linguistic subjection within the context of neoliberalism. When we talk about discursive management of social cleavages, we're referring to how language and communication are used to shape social divisions. Contemporary critical discourse analysis, or CDA, focuses on examining these discursive dimensions, how language influences social transformation, especially under neoliberal ideologies. Neoliberal ideas are often conveyed through semiotic modes, meaning signs, symbols, and various forms of communication that blur the lines between academia and commercial interests. This blending makes these ideas more pervasive and harder to critically analyze. Now, power today isn't just about control in the traditional sense. It's increasingly about management strategies that anticipate and manage social splits. These strategies assign different social destinies based on a person's ability to meet certain economic requirements, like profitability and competitiveness. This leads to what I call differentiated strategies of subjection. For example, middle classes are often targeted with positive motivation and therapeutic discourses, trying to encourage self-improvement and resilience. Meanwhile, systems of prison, surveillance, and policing are directed toward what are labeled as the dangerous classes. So, in essence, neoliberalism doesn't just shape economic policies, it also shapes the very ways we talk about, manage, and control social groups through language and institutional practices. This slide really highlights how discourse becomes a tool for maintaining social hierarchies and divisions today. Let's talk about class and linguistic variation. Language doesn't exist in a vacuum. It actually serves as a social stratifier. Sociolinguistic research helps us understand how language use is connected to social variables like age, gender, ethnicity, and especially social class. You'll notice that linguistic variation often reflects social stratification. In other words, different social classes tend to use different linguistic features, and the proportions in which they do so can reveal a lot about social hierarchies. For example, speakers from higher social classes generally tend to use more standard or posher forms of language. These are often perceived as more correct or refined. Conversely, those from lower social classes might use more vernacular or local forms, which are often seen as more informal or less polished. It's also important to recognize that negative attitudes toward certain non-standard dialects are usually rooted in classist stereotypes or biases. These biases unfairly associate certain ways of speaking with social status or intelligence, which can perpetuate social inequalities. So, understanding this connection between language and social class helps us see how language acts as a marker of identity and social positioning. It's a key part of understanding the social dimensions of language variation. Let's take a closer look at how standard language functions as a form of cultural and symbolic capital. Bourdieu's ideas have been really influential in understanding discursive power. Sociological models, like those informed by Bourdieu, help us analyze social class by looking at different types of capital: economic, social, and cultural. These models show us how language and discourse are tied to social hierarchies. Fairclough's critical discourse analysis, or CDA, was actually influenced by Bourdieu's concepts of capital and power. This means that our language practices aren't just about communication, they're deeply connected to social power dynamics. Now, the dominance of Standard English is not just a linguistic preference, it's linked to capitalist interests. It functions as a class dialect, giving the dominant social group a kind of cultural capital. This cultural capital helps establish aesthetic distinctions, what we might call taste, which in turn legitimizes privilege and sustains social hierarchies. And here's an important point. Access to these prestigious forms of discourse isn't equal. There are pervasive constraints that deny marginalized groups the opportunity to access these cultural goods. So, language becomes a tool that reinforces social inequalities, which ties back to our overall theme of understanding discursive power and social structure. Let's delve into how academic genres serve as sites of class power. These genres, such as dissertations and their defenses, are more than just communication tools. They are institutional gatekeepers. They reflect the goals of specific disciplines or social institutions and impose certain constraints on language and presentation style. For example, the PhD dissertation and oral defense are considered culminating genres of doctoral education. They can be viewed in two ways, either as the final step in a series of examination genres or as opportunities to contribute new knowledge to a field. The defense itself functions like a high-stakes meeting with an editorial committee, but it also has a ritualistic aspect. Interestingly, humor is often used during defenses to ease tension and help proceedings flow more smoothly, creating a somewhat informal yet structured atmosphere. Access to these powerful academic genres, like essays and dissertations, can significantly influence a student's ability to participate in professional academic communities. If students aren't taught how to navigate these genres, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, it can be seen as a form of social irresponsibility. Essentially, mastering these genres can open doors and help level the playing field, reinforcing the connection between language, power, and access within academia.